de mi vida. Amé mucho una mujer de mi alma la más querida. Me traicionó la perdida, caramba, qué ingrato y mal proceder. Ella me hizo beber, ella me hizo un perdido. A la droga me tiré, amigo mío, y a la cárcel fui llevado. Los amigos me olvidaron, solo mi madre lloraba. A Dios pedía y rogaba que se salvara su hijo. Recuerden lo que les digo, que en la prisión y en la cama solo nuestra madre nos ama, caramba. No hay dinero, no hay amigos, linda Guajira, mi son te llama.
Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar.
Greetings, Aquaba. Welcome. Hello. We hope that you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength today. And we are glad that you have decided to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're so glad that you're joining us for the topic today, which is what would Dr. Martin Luther King say today? Dr. King was, of course, assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And his born day, which this backward country is preparing to commemorate in the backward way that it does everything, is actually January 15th, which is Wednesday. But of course, the appointed holiday is January 20th, which is the following Monday. And of course, that's also the day that the next clown that was elected president is inaugurated. That you know, go figure. That's perfect for how backward this country is. You inaugurate a clown and a buffoon on the day that Dr. King, that you're supposed to be commemorating Dr. King. And I would have said the same thing in 2021 because they're all clowns and buffoons. But I'm glad that you're here to join us to talk about this important topic. And, you know, I'll just say that in terms of health, mental and physical health, like I'm exhausted today. We've had a lot of family activity going on due to deaths that have taken place. Two significant elders in the family have passed away within the last 3 weeks. So that's been a lot, and a lot of energy involved with that. People at the house here hosting people, all that, you know, goes along with that. And then yesterday, we had a wonderful anti-fascist conference here in Sacramento, where I live, and a lot of people attended that. And I was able, based on the grace of the ancestors, to do a workshop on organized political education there. I can't even say it was standing room only. There were there were people out in the hallways, and from what I understood, they had to turn people away. There were so many people that wanted to get in there, and people were like, "You're popular, you're popular." And I don't know that it was me. I like to think that it was the topic, but I'm so happy that people were interested in political education, and a lot of people wanted to follow up and do more work around it. So that's a wonderful thing. But we also helped coordinate security. There was a MAGA convening a couple of blocks away from the anti-fascist conference, so we had a strong security presence. So it was an all-day thing, on my feet all day, thinking, acting. So I'm exhausted, but I'm glad to be here. I started to ask you, Shakura, if you could, just take this program yourself, but I decided, this is exactly what my spirit wants, and that was correct. I'm so happy to be here. A lot of times when you have problems in your life, if you were more involved in the struggle against injustice, you would feel so much better. That is absolutely true. So we honor the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. They are engaged in a struggle for their just self-determination, and we are right there with them. These lands belong to them, and we know that the key to their liberation and their forward progress is gaining these lands back. That's what their struggle is about. That's what they're engaged in their struggle to accomplish. And that is exactly what they will do. And we will do everything in our power to assist them in that effort. These lands don't belong to us. Africa is our national home. Whether we are physically here is not the point. That's not relevant to what I'm saying. What we're saying is that the indigenous people should have determination of what happens in these lands. And they have never once said that we could not exist here with them. In fact, their primary history, I know there are some clowns that are trying to create controversy around this, but we study history, so we know their primary history had always been bringing us into their family circles, into their tribal circles, and oftentimes being the only place where we could go outside of the slave plantations during those times as African people. So we have never had that be a situation where they were talking to us as if we should not be here. Although some of us really act like we shouldn't be anywhere in this capitalist system. It's like Dr. Khalid Muhammad said, have you forgotten that once we were brought here, we were robbed of our names, robbed of our language, lost our religion, our culture, our God. And many of us, by the way we act, we even lost our minds. And that piece that he spoke was recorded on Public Enemy's, oh man, I can't even remember the name of the record, but it was on there, A Nation of Millions Holds Us Back album, which is one of the best hip hop albums ever, if you want my humble opinion. So we honor the indigenous people. We honor our African ancestors. We have a program next week, an annual one we do, talking about the January 17th murders in 1961 and 1969 in 61, Patrice Lumumba, Maurice Mpolo, and Joseph Okoto in the Congo. And in 1969, on that date, Apprentice Bunchy Carter and John Huggins of the Black Panther Party. And so we talk about them and what that should mean to us in 2025. So we're glad that you're here to join us. And we introduce, as we always do, just by letting you know, our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party with our base being in Africa. And our objective, our work, our focus is on achieving Pan-Africanism, which we correctly define as one unified socialist Africa. That's our objective. That's what we are fighting for. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, it's not a theory, it's not a hope, it's not a dream. It's actual on-the-ground work that is happening. You're not going to learn about it on CNN and CIA networks. They're not going to talk about any movement that's designed to bring down imperialism. So that's why we're here. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which, if you're looking at a screen, and hopefully you are, it's on your screen there. It's a work that outlines the strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism, which is uniting all of the genuinely revolutionary Pan-African forces on the ground who are committed to this objective and definition of Pan-Africanism being one unified socialist Africa. And Our Ancestors' Voices, this program is hosted each week, same time, same places, by myself, Ajamu, and my biological and ideological daughter, Shakura. We are both active organizers within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So we're so glad to be here and so glad you're here. What would Dr. King say today? And so to get us started, I turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. I appreciate you, comrade. I appreciate you being here with us. This is just a testament, you all, that, this work is bigger than ourselves. And so, shout out to Comrade Ajamu and other comrades who are, feeling the burnout and feeling the fatigue, but also understanding that they have compassion for humanity. That's why they do this work. They have a love for humanity. They love justice, and they love for people to achieve and to benefit from justice. And we all have a responsibility to play in how we navigate what that looks like. I think it would be very easy to just, give up and to not be interested in moving forward if we had the frame where we were just putting ourselves first. And you could take Dr. King as a great example of that. But instead, kind of moving into this space where it's very obvious that everything that we do, everything that has happened to us as colonized people, as African people, it's because we have a responsibility to think about how the collective are impacted. We have a responsibility to understand that this work is bigger than ourselves. It's bigger than our children. It's bigger than our families. It's bigger than generations to come after us. This work that we're doing now is going to impact every single living organism on this planet, from plants to animals to oxygen to natural environmental effects. And so we have every responsibility. We can't give up. We have every responsibility to not only maintain the integrity of the work that we're doing, but to also take care of ourselves in the process so that we can do this work. And I think Dr. King does an immaculate example of that, showing us what that looks like, while also coupling this ideology of starting to develop what Pan-Africanism looked like for him. And we will talk about that more in detail. So we can start with kind of looking at the transformation as it starts to take place, right? So we can look at the capitalist Dr. King and what that particular version has looked like for many of us, right? We can think about how capitalism is a system, of course, that prioritizes private corporations to make money. And the thing that you want to remember is those private corporations are able to make money because they control the production of the resources. That is so important to remember, right? So capitalism wants us to believe, and that's why propaganda is so effective in teaching us, because some of us believe this to be the case, that as many of us do, Dr. King was the following. He was not a brave person, but instead a coward. More specifically, representing cowardliness in terms of what it looked like to have a version of Christian that so many people embrace today. And you have to ask yourself, what does that look like to demonstrate and represent what it means to be cowardly as it relates to being a Christian? And then also kind of pulling in this piece of, this was only to be focused on achieving racial integration at the expense of our dignity. And so what we're trying to say with this slide is the system that we suffer from every single day, known as capitalism, has every intention of reteaching us the same message that we've already learned, especially if we grew up in this backwards country where we remembered having that Monday in January off to commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. And every year, the teaching would be the same, that we should practice nonviolence, just like Dr. King, that we should love all people, and that we should see no race, class, or gender as a separatist function, but instead that we should all come together and hold hands and look past the fact that some people are suffering at the hands of oppression. We should look past the fact that you have unhoused people that are outside when many of us are experiencing harsh winter elements where it is too cold to be outside, but unhouseless people are outside nonetheless, where we have people evacuating houses because their houses are burning to the ground, where we have people that can't afford to put food on their tables. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. We have people that experience patriarchal BS every single day. We have people who are not getting paid what they deserve to make because a livable wage is just simply out of the question until we fight back and demand better. We have people that are colonized and not understanding the repercussions that are still taking place today because we have experienced colonization, which, by the way, is not very clear to everyone today. I just had a conversation with someone yesterday about how enslaved Africans took on the names of their plantation owners, slave masters. And the person said to me, yeah, but that was slavery. Once slavery was abolished, that was over. And I just laughed because I said they still have the names today. How could that have anything to do with the ending of slavery, which we know really wasn't a true thing, because there were states like the one I'm in, Tennessee, that still practiced slavery even after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. But that's another topic for another day. We're not going to comment on that tonight. What we are going to come back to is making this argument that the assumption is if you take on the capitalist approach of Dr. King, then you can just look past all the bad things that are happening to people that deserve better. This is also a way of thinking about how if we kind of just look past it, then we can come together, and us coming together will find a way to deal with it, which is really not a healthy way, because really what this teaching is giving us the opportunity to understand is that we should not fight back. That's really the teaching. That's why it's nonviolent, right? We should not fight back. We should not resist. We should not push back. I shouldn't have had that conversation with the person about the slave names. I shouldn't have pushed back and said, that very much is the case today. This is exactly why I have what you would call an African name instead of an English name, or instead of a Spanish name, or instead of a Dutch name. This is precisely what that means. That's precisely what that means. But this is the ideology, right? And so we have to kind of think more about this and even kind of break down what that really looks like. This is also in line with kind of appropriating and promoting, I would say, US capitalism, imperialism. I would say it's about appropriating and promoting US in terms of it being the dominant force here, and not connecting Africa, not connecting any of the points that are happening around the world. All of this is framing the US and framing a capitalist ideology so that we can only focus on what is right in front of us. This is precisely why we have every responsibility not only to make this world better, but the best way that we can do that is by teaching ourselves the information that has been withheld from us. That's what we mean when we say increasing our political education. That is exactly what we mean, you all, because if we don't increase our political education, that information is already out there, but it has been kept and locked away from us. And so we have the responsibility, you all. We have the responsibility to go out and to seek it. We have the responsibility to look after it. We have the responsibility to ascertain it. We cannot rely on capitalism to teach us that those things that have been kept from us. Why would they do that? That's their Achilles heel. Why would they teach us the things that they know are going to help us revolt, the things they know are going to help us resist, the things they know are going to help us fight back? Why would they do that? That would be like us giving them our greatest weapon. Why would we do that? So we're at a point here where we need to kind of understand really what this breaks down to, you all. And we can even think about how, this piece about even painting this picture for how Dr. King was supposed to be represented, right? I love this presentation because it always finds a way to really kind of paint this picture, and we kind of see this image. And then as we get deeper into the slides and the presentation progresses, we see that that really wasn't the Dr. King that everyone knows. There was a whole other side to him that was managed to keep quiet. There was a whole other side to him that just miraculously didn't make it into the papers. It miraculously never was recorded. And part of that is because we know that he resisted. We know that he developed a Pan-Africanist ideology. We know that he was building himself up to go home and go to the continent. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but we know that he was on his way to do that. I might be misspeaking. You all have to forgive me. I have dissertation brain, so sometimes things are slipping. I might be misspeaking. He might have gone home. But my point is, he was building up his Pan-Africanist ideology, and we know that's why he had to be assassinated. That is a true statement, because he was building up too much momentum. He was building up too much. And so in doing that, this is how we start to kind of understand that. And I know Comrade Ajamu will set the record straight, so I'm not worried about that. Thankful that he is able to bring the knowledge and bring the truth here. And so even looking at this photo, before I advance to the next slide, we can even think, looking at this photo of King, this dedicated activist, right, for justice, which meant he was willing to chart his own path. And he even did that by meeting with one of the leaders of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, right, even against the wishes of so many people around him. There were so many people that strongly discouraged that, and they didn't think it was a good idea. I'm sure because there's so many ways that you can pit even the two religions against one another. Well, we don't want you meeting with them because that's not what we believe in. And more importantly, the Nation of Islam made it very clear what their stance on was against capitalism, and that also was not good for publicity. That also was not good for King to be associating with a known organization that had very much taken an anti-capitalistic approach. And so we're just thinking about all these pieces and really tying them in. And I think it's so important to do that, because more often than not, especially in the US, we find that we're so busy focused on race. We're so busy focused on sometimes gender. We're so busy focused on these other pieces that make a really good argument for why these oppressions need to be addressed. And they do. I'm not discrediting that white supremacy and racism are not relevant. I'm not discrediting that sexism and patriarchy, homophobia, Islamophobia, those things are very important. I am not discrediting that they're not. The point I'm making is that if there is so much focus and time on race and class, then, well, not class, that's what I was going to say, focused on race and gender, we tend to forget about class. We tend to forget that that also plays a part in the positions that we're in. This is why we continue to bring up the fact that livable wages is something that everyone deserves, but yet none of that is really happening. This is why so many people are struggling to pay their bills. This is why so many people are struggling to keep a roof over their head and food on the table and utilities on, and to make sure the car is up to date with all the things that need to be done to maintenance the vehicle. It's a lot. It can be very overwhelming. This is why multiple people have multiple jobs. This is why multiple people are asking their children to go and work, because they're trying to keep up with everything that they have. And then you have the higher costs of rising costs and economic systems that are putting people in very tough positions, very, very, very tough positions, where they have to decide between getting medical care or getting groceries, getting the car fixed, or making sure that grandma has the Alzheimer's medicine that she needs, right? I mean, there's just so many pieces to that. And so we can focus on class in addition to race and in addition to gender, because class has everything to do with the class divide that we find ourselves in. That's exactly how capitalism thrives, is being able to separate us based on how much money we make, because money is attached to our values. Next slide, please. Money is attached to our values, and money is attached to how people value us. There's the other piece of that. So the Dr. King that they want for us, okay? So we're thinking about this US capitalist system. We understand that the government has played into that. And we also understand that who Dr. King became was despite what they wanted him to become, all right? So even with this result happening, it was after his assassination, April 4th, 1968, that we have continued to see their softening of his image and work. So they're still painting this picture that he was nonviolent. They're still painting this ideology for us that he practiced his Christian values and he didn't believe in being harmful to other people. He wanted to be a good Christian, and he wanted to make sure that he was demonstrating that for others, especially those that practice the same faith as him, so that they could see what that looked like. This was still the case to continue that, and their work to reshape who Dr. King was has continued on even to this day. This is why you have to educate yourselves, because if you're not in a position to find the truth, then it can be really difficult for you to really understand who this man was that you see in this photo. Even a photo like this, I think, would be hidden from the public, because anybody could look at this photo, but not everybody would necessarily recognize all the faces that we see in this picture, right? And so just kind of understanding a little bit more of the kind of work that he was doing, it's really important for us to break that down, because as I said, he was starting to get more of an understanding as the work was progressing, and he was starting to connect the fact that this is not just a US centered problem. He was really starting to build on that. And I really empathize with him, and I sympathize with him on that, because that's kind of been my reckoning within the last 5 years of joining work study. February 6th will be 5 years, 4 years, I think, that I've been in work study. I celebrated the anniversary on my calendar, but I can't remember. But my point is that's kind of where that's starting to play in. So I can definitely see how his progression was starting to take place, because that's what's happening to me. I'm metaphoricizing. I'm kind of seeing it take place. And so this is where we really start to kind of understand what that looks like, because, you know, for him to be in this photo with Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, we know that there were a lot of ways that their works were kind of aligning, right? And a lot of people wouldn't want you to put those two together and make those connections, but that's precisely the work that they were doing together. That's precisely the work that they were doing together, because they both were starting to understand there are some serious problems, and the common denominator that African people are facing around the world is poverty, health, class status. Like, these are common denominators. These are common issues that Africans, everywhere are facing. And so you can't just center it on the US. At some point, you have to kind of look past that and say, why is it that Africans everywhere, so regardless of where they live, everywhere are dealing with the same issues? What's up with that? And then you really start to dig a little bit deeper into it after that. Dr. King was willing to subvert his ego, and he listened to younger activists. This is why him and KT, Kwame Ture, had such a connection, because KT was able to inform him on some stuff. He gave him some different ideologies. He helped him see things a little bit differently. I'm sure Comrade Ajamu would correct me on this if I'm incorrect, but I believe King was even delayed with his ideology development in terms of taking an anti-Zionist approach. I think it took him a little bit longer to come to that understanding. I think he was pro-Zionist, probably because they fed him the religious rhetoric. And I think he thought that he was doing what was best to support, you know, his comrades that practice Judaism. But I'm sure it was KT. I'm sure it was KT that helped him understand that's actually incorrect, brother. That's actually incorrect. And these are the reasons why. And so just kind of breaking that down and helping him to see that. And so, you know, this is what drove King to be able to really form more radical positions, because of his relationships with KT, especially on issues like the war in Vietnam, especially on issues like that. We can also think of other situations where he was understanding what was going on in different parts of the world. He was starting to make these connections about how there's oppression that can't necessarily be addressed any other way without just looking at race, class, and gender, and specifically kind of looking at this lineage of how Africans have been mistreated for so long, how colonized people have been mistreated for so long, and drawing these connections to start to see it doesn't matter what we do. These are going to continue to be the conditions until we push back against this, until we fight back against this, and until we find a way to organize ourselves, because we're not going to be able to do it individually. And this is why Dr. King was in several organizations. And so if we're looking to someone to give us an example of how to do this work, which I think is a question a lot of people are asking themselves, especially with this day and age, what can I do? How can I fight back? What can I do to make a change? Join an organization that is working for justice. We say that every week, and we're not going to stop saying it. I won't stop saying it until I have no more breath in my body. We need everyone to join an organization that is working for justice, because if you all do that, then we all can join forces and fight back against the systems that are oppressing us. You may be in an organization that has a completely different ideology than mine. That's fine. As long as we both agree that humanity deserves a better world, as long as we both agree that nobody deserves to be oppressed, regardless of if they are queer or if they are a non-male or if they are African or Asian, differently abled. If you and I can agree on those concepts, I don't care who you're organizing with. That has nothing to do with me. That's like how much air pressure you have in your tire. That has nothing to do with me. All I want to know is, am I going to be able to count on you so we can take down the system together? And if the answer is yes, then let's do the work. But we got to increase our political education, and we have got to join an organization that is working for justice. If you have room for one more New Year's resolution, that should be it.
Ashe, obrigada, asante sana, medasi. Thank you very much, Shakura. Just the points that you brought up, Dr. King, without question, made it home to Africa. He actually, this will surprise a lot of people in the African liberation movement. He actually made it to Africa before Malcolm X. Dr. King attended Ghana's independence commemoration on March 6, 1957 in Ghana. And we've talked about that, and we posted the picture of Dr. King and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, in Accra, in March of 1957. And as we've also said before, from that point forward, the relationship was established between Dr. King and Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, of course, was the founder of the Convention People's Party in Ghana, helped lead Ghana to independence in 1957. And Nkrumah is the visionary for the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. And Dr. King, developing a relationship with Nkrumah, became a mentee of Kwame Nkrumah, just as Malcolm X did, and maintained that mentee-mentor relationship with Kwame Nkrumah until Dr. King was assassinated in April of 1968. So no question that not only Dr. King, but Coretta Scott King accompanied Dr. King to Ghana's independence in 1957. So you are correct in the sense that Dr. King had to develop a much broader understanding of Africa and the role that Africa played in our life. And there are many recordings where Dr. King is talking specifically about our African identity. You won't hear any of those this month when capitalism is quote unquote commemorating his birthday. All you'll hear is, I have a dream. You won't hear any of the analysis and the development in Dr. King's thinking, because they don't want you to think that he had any development in his thinking. They want you to think that all that he was concerned about was sitting at the table with white folks and eating food next to white folks and living in neighborhoods where white folks are. And that's all they want us today to think, that all we have to be concerned about is being up next to white folks. And that is why we have to raise these contradictions, because, it's like I said to someone years ago, they were telling me, European man was telling me that, well, you just mad because you're not white. You can't do the things that white people do. That's what he said. And I said, no, actually, I can do what white people do and a whole lot better. That's not a single thought in my mind. I've never believed that European people were devils. And the reason why I could never believe that is because they don't deserve any type of supernatural status, even if it's a negative supernatural status. They don't deserve that. And plus, I've worked with too many of them, and I've had too many of them reporting to me to know that they are certainly in no better of a psychological, physiological, mental, intellectual position than anybody else on earth. So I know that that's not true. So this is one thing that has to be understood about Dr. King. And also the question of Zionism. I think the question of Zionism, the question of Black power, Pan-Africanism, all of these things, I think the problem as it relates to Dr. King is he just didn't live long enough to develop a proper understanding of all of those concepts. He was certainly propagated by the pro-Zionist lobby and was a member of Black Americans in Support of Israel Committee, BASIC, which still exists today, a pro-Zionist lobbying force that has had virtually every one of the African politicians on the national level as representatives of it. Today, Basic is people like Al Sharpton, and those people are part of Basic. And they're the mouthpieces in the African community for Zionism. But I think had Dr. King lived long enough, he certainly would have been influenced by SNCC's evolving radical anti-Zionist position, which influenced much of what's happening today around the question of Zionism in this society. And just like King was open to being influenced by SNCC on the question of Vietnam, he certainly would have done the same with the question of Zionism, the question of Black power, which he was clearly emerging on. No question about that. For anyone that studies Dr. King's development so close to his assassination, and the question of Pan-Africanism, because we know, as we always say, the highest expression of Black power is Pan-Africanism. So these are the things that have to be understood about King, along with the fact that he was a man of principle. And what we mean by that, the definition we're using for principle, is someone who will stand up for what's right despite the consequences, even though it means adverse consequences to their lives. They will still stand up for what's right. And people like King, who operate under those types of principles, live their lives guided by principles of justice. There are no other principles that matter. The only principles that matter are principles of justice. And these types of folks make decisions based upon righteousness, not avoiding consequences. I was sitting at one of the life ceremonies I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. I was sitting there Thursday, and it was in a Christian church, and the ancestor who made their transition wasn't a member of the church, but you know how these things happen. And so it ended up there, and the minister was talking about the people in the church, we believe that we know we will all die, but we believe that what motivates us is that we will come back. And he said that multiple times. And every time he said it, I was thinking, like, I never even thought of that in that fashion before. Like, I'm not concerned at all about coming back. My concern is, while I'm here, what type of person am I going to be while I'm here? And my motivation for that could never be just so that I could get an individual award of coming back somewhere. Like, I don't give a damn about coming back. What I care about is, what will I do so that when I die, my hope is that people are able to say that African did his best to make a contribution. And that, to me, is how I've always thought about it. Like, I'm not thinking about it, well, I got to do this so I can get I mean, that's incredible to me that so many people could be functioning on that level. Like, that's your level of operation as a human being. I mean, that's just really interesting to me. But King was not that type of Christian. Clearly he was not. When they talk about you couldn't make you couldn't pay the cost that Jesus paid, King paid that cost. He knew that he would be assassinated. He said the night before he was murdered, he said it on stage in Memphis, Tennessee, where Shakura is right now. He said that, I'm not going to get to the mountaintop with you. I would love a long life. Longevity has its place. We're looking at it on YouTube. That's what the man said. I know I'm not going to get there, but I've gone to the mountaintop and I see what's waiting for us. That's what he said. So when someone's talking, and if you watch it, if you've seen it, the conviction that the man had, when he said, I'm not fearing any man, he wasn't lying. He wasn't afraid of a damn thing. There was nothing they could do to him. That's what they knew. That's why they had to assassinate the man. And for those people that don't understand that, that's why no one's coming after you, because you don't have that type of conviction and dedication to justice. So it's important to understand that's who we're really talking about when we talk about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And as a result, Dr. King today would have to be completely opposed to the capitalist system. I don't care what Wells Fargo and Allstate and all those other damn criminals do. They will never be able to convince us that Dr. King would have mellowed and sold out and become accommodationist in the sense a principled person could never do that. An opportunist does that every day. And it's our responsibility, it's your responsibility to know the difference between the two. A principled person could never do that. A principled person would choose death over selling out. And so Dr. King would certainly be opposed to the capitalist system. And as a result of that, would be an arch critic of the people upholding capitalism. Even people like Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, and all these people, Dr. King would have to be opposed to what those people represent. And I know that's a hard pill for a lot of you to swallow, but if you study the life of Dr. King, it's irrefutable. You cannot make an argument refuting what I just said. He, without question, because he would have been opposed to sending $5 billion in aid to savagely eradicate the Palestinian people. He would, on principle, he would be opposed to that. He would be opposed to the creation of the African Command Project, 100 U.S. military bases in Africa to suppress the African masses so that capitalism can continue to operate, stealing everything from Africa, business as usual. Dr. King would be opposed to that. And because he would be opposed to that, he would have to be on the opposite side of Barack Obama, who was the chief architect of African Command. He would have to be against Kamala Harris, who's absolute Zionist, and sat up there and told you just a few months ago, I will do everything in my power to support the state of Israel. That's a damn criminal that would say something like that. And you telling me that I got to vote for somebody? You can go straight to hell. That'll never happen. That'll never happen. You are wasting your breath if you're trying to tell us that we need to get behind some absolute foolishness like that. That'll never happen. I'd rather die. I'd rather take this breath and die right now before I get behind that sort of nonsense, because we are people of principles. And that's what we try to do. And Dr. King proved that he couldn't be bought. That's why they killed him. That's the reason they killed him. He couldn't be bought. They composed some sort of pattern. This type of thing is a big deal to some of you, but they composed this package of his alleged affairs, and they did this under the Nixon administration, and the Reagan administration picked it up when the fight was on to bring about the Dr. King holiday in the 1980s. They reintroduced this package and they sent it out. They sent it to Coretta Scott King, and they sent it to media outlets. And thank goodness the media outlets, I know Rolling Stone was one of them, had at least the level of morality that they refused to publish it. And Coretta Scott King won my respect because she refused to even talk about it. Whatever problem she had with her husband for whatever he was doing, she was not going to let the system use her against his work. And that's what principled people do, you all. So he proved he couldn't be bought. None of that stopped any of the work he was doing. And that's why they had to kill him. So the picture on the screen, tells you a lot, because it's Dr. King lobbying, meeting Malcolm X at the Capitol in 1964, June of 1964, lobbying for the Civil Rights Bill. And basically that means going to these politicians and telling them that if you don't pass this bill, we're going to build a movement and shut you down. And they have to listen to that because that movement existed. The problem you all have today that are into electoral politics is there's no movement like existed then. So those people aren't listening to you. They don't even, I bet you when you talk to politicians, they don't even have a pen and pad to take notes. That's how much they disrespect us. They just, okay, I understand what you mean. And then they go have a beer and forget all about you and everything you talked about, because we don't even have a movement to put that kind of pressure on them, even within the capitalist realm. That doesn't exist. And Dr. King would tell you that the only way you can hold these people accountable is you have to have a mass movement. Those of you that think that you're doing something just by voting with no movement, you're not listening to Dr. King. He made that message clear because everything he did was about building movement, mass movement. So take that to heart. And here's the picture of Kwame Nkrumah and Dr. King in Ghana, as the caption says, during the Ghana's independence commemoration in 1957. And it talked about what I mentioned to you, that Nkrumah maintained that relationship with Dr. King. And Dr. King maintained relationships with people like Kwame Nkrumah. And he kept very abreast of interest in Africa. And again, you have to search for speeches he's making, talking. You listen to this, you think you're listening to Kwame Ture or Malcolm X or someone. It's Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talking about Africa. I've researched those speeches and listened to them. He had a very clear understanding that we are African people. Even if he didn't live long enough to start saying it publicly, he clearly had a very clear understanding of that. And as King's class consciousness grew, as evidenced by his expansion beyond just seeing the struggle as one against racial segregation, but to understanding the impact of U.S. imperialism on the world and worker exploitation. You know, King died in Memphis supporting a worker strike. This was a reflection of his growing consciousness. And those last days that he was alive, he was wearing a Black is Beautiful button. So he was coming to understand, with the help of the younger activists like Kwame Ture and the others, he was coming to understand that contrary to the message of the capitalist system, the Black Power movement was never anti-white. It was always about asserting the dignity of African people that has been subverted for 500 years. And so this is why you have to listen and understand, what Dr. King was actually doing. Because if you can do that, you can see today, looking at what's happening today, that Dr. King today would tell you that Pan-Africanism and African nationalism is not anti-white. It's not anti-white. Although the capitalist system today still wants you to, now any mention of doing anything for African people, for indigenous people, for Asian people, for LGBTQ people, anything that has any mention of that is categorized as being anti-white. That's their whole agenda. That's the whole agenda behind all the people that voted for Trump and many others, is everything that's not about them is anti-white. And if you listen to Dr. King, he was telling you 60 years ago that he was coming to understand that we can assert our dignity. It has nothing to do with you if you're not African or indigenous. It has nothing to do with you. If you are a person who lives with an effort to be principled in your life, you will recognize that these struggles that don't involve you, you have to support them if you're a decent human being, period. Like, I support all types of struggles that have nothing to do with the African liberation struggle and Pan-Africanism. People that know nothing about the struggle I'm engaged in. The workshop I gave yesterday was, 75, 80 people. Majority of them were European. And I told them, none of you know anything about our struggle for Pan-Africanism. And I don't really care whether you know anything about our struggle for Pan-Africanism, because our work doesn't include you. It's not about you. But the reason why I'm here talking to you is that the capitalist system uses your people to subvert our struggle. It's done that historically. And so you're needed to go into your communities and educate your people that we are not their problem. Their problem is this capitalist system. So that's what you need to do. And I'm showing you how you can do that. That's why we do that. But Dr. King was clear. He was clear on these questions. There was no question about his growth as it related to understanding that, as he himself said, I fear that I've integrated my people into a burning building. He was talking about the capitalist system, you all. That's what he meant. So there's no way in hell, if you have a person of principle and you have the addition of increased knowledge, that those principles will continue to stand and their analysis will continue to develop. So a Dr. King today would have to have an even more developed position on the question of capitalism. In fact, we would say that a Dr. King in 2025 would be a scientific socialist. There's no way it could be any other result. There's no way it could be any other result, because he would have to come to understand the contradictions of class and labor and the contradictions of colonialism and justice. And all of these things would have to lead him to come to a conclusion that a system where production is controlled by the masses of people is consistent with the gospel of Jesus Christ that he wanted to represent and live with his life. No question about that. And we'll use the example to illustrate that Dr. King and Palestine, because as we mentioned, Dr. King was confused about the Zionist movement, and he wasn't alone. The Zionist movement has manipulated the African masses for the last 100 years. That's happened. And all you have to do is go back to the Garvey movement, the movement of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey and Amy Jock Garvey and the millions of Africans who were in the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the 1920s, the organization of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Amy Garvey, the organization that published the Negro World in 33 countries, that started the Black Star Line in protest to the White Star Line, which produced the Titanic ship, that preached that Africa belongs to the Africans 100 years ago. But Garvey, as much as he did for our people, and he did quite a bit, was confused on the question of Zionism and was manipulated by the World Zionist Congress, which was the chief organization promoting the concept of the establishment of the state of Israel as a political tool to advance imperialism by building a base for it in the Middle East. And that was their objective. And they manipulated the African masses because they studied us. We don't study anybody, but everybody studies us. And the Zionist movement studied us. And they understood that there was no people in this country who would be more sympathetic to a call for people to go home than the African masses who have been kidnapped from Africa and treated like slaves since that time to this day in this backward ass country. The Zionists understood that. And so they went to work. And the World Zionist Congress, under the guise of criminal charlatans like Shane Wiseman, approached the NAACP in this country and got the NAACP to sponsor a paid speaking tour for these Zionists, telling them that we got the same struggle. That's where all that nonsense started, that we have the same struggle as these Zionists. We have a legitimate right to claim Africa as our home. We never gave up Africa. We never said, oh, I want to leave Africa. You were forced to leave Africa, African. That was not your choice. The choice that you made is to continue to be ignorant about who you are as an African. That is your choice. But you didn't have any decision in leaving Africa. You didn't decide that you wanted to be in New York or Canada or Germany or any of these goddamn places. That decision was made by you for the people who have oppressed us for the last 500 years. And we are cooperating so well with them by adopting everything about what they wanted to do to us. We continue to hold their names, their European names. We continue to only know their European languages. We continue, more importantly, to see the world only through their European capitalist lens. These are the choices we are making. But we didn't make the decision to come here. And the Zionists knew that, so they exploited us. And Marcus Garvey in the 20s was running around talking about, we have the same struggle as the people struggling for the state of Israel, because Zion means to return home. We have a right. to use that word Zion. The people that created the state of Israel have no right to do that. These are people from Europe. We're going to tell the truth on this program, and the internet will probably go out, because every time we start to talk like this, then that's when the problems start. But these people are from Europe. Talk to any of them. Talk to anybody you know that's Ashkenazi Jew, which means they're European. Ask them where their family comes from. They will not be able to answer and tell you where they come from, Jewish land, because there's no such thing. The state of Israel has only existed since 1948. There are people listening to this broadcast that have been on the earth longer than that. So they cannot answer that way. The only way they can answer is by telling you, well, my family's from Russia. My family's from Germany. My family is from Poland, from Romania, from Hungary. That's how they have to accurately answer the question. So that's their ethnicity, you all. There's no Jewish ethnicity. And there could never be a Jewish ethnicity, because Judaism has its roots in Africa. The Bible tells you that. The first country mentioned in the Bible is Cush, which is the ancient name of Ethiopia. The Bible tells you that. The first documented parishioners of the Jewish faith were from that region of East Africa. They were called the Falasha Jews. They are descendants today from those folks in Ethiopia. Those are the original Jews. They were African people. So how the hell did we go from the original Jews being in Africa to white folks saying that this is our nationality to be Judah? How the hell does that happen? So we're not speaking against anybody, because we know the history. The Jews were without question persecuted in Europe. And that's why the Zionist movement thought that the concept of creating a state and driving everybody to that state and pressuring the states in Europe, including the Third Reich Nazi regime in Germany, to support the establishment of the state of Israel. You think it's a coincidence that the state of Israel happened just 3 years after the Third Reich was defeated? I mean, none of this was a coincidence, you all. And so we understand why Dr. King was confused on the Zionist question. But again, as we've said, if Dr. King were alive today, he would have to stand before all of us and declare to the world that he is anti-Zionist, because he would know all of these things that I just talked about, which there's no way he could have known all of this back then. But he would know it today, and he would talk about that. But the reality is that this is just a hyperbole that I'm doing, because there would be no Dr. King today, because he was a man of principle who had a mass movement. You can be a principle just by yourself. They don't give a damn about that, because nobody's listening to you. They got the propaganda under control, on lockdown. But if you are of principle and people you're working with are of principle, and there is a mass movement moving in the direction of justice, you will see just how undemocratic this society actually is, and you will see that in a hurry. We want to thank you for joining us today, and we invite you back next week. A day for martyrs: Lumumba, Bunchy, John, Maurice, Thomas, our martyrs from the Congo, our martyrs from the Black Panther Party. We talk about them. January 17th is that day, but we're doing the program on the 19th. So join us for that. And we have a program. I neglected to put the flyer up, but we have a program for those in Sacramento this coming Monday, the day that they commemorate Dr. King, at the Shakura Center on Broadway Street here in Sacramento, a day of programming in honor of the radical Dr. Martin Luther King. So we want to invite you to that. It starts at 11 a.m. And if you know the work of the Shakura Center, they have food that they give away, clothes. So it's a good day to come out, bring your children, and commemorate the real Dr. King, 3320 Broadway here in Sacramento. And then the flyer on the screen on February 1st, please spread the word. We're having a community discussion, and it's not just a discussion for people to run their mouths and then leave out the room and go eat food and defecate and forget all about it. This discussion is about how do we build structures to organize our communities. That's what it's going to be about. So if you're just someone that just wants to talk, this is probably not the event for you if you're in this area. But if you're someone who really wants to work with other people to try to build independent structures, that's what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to be trying to do. And the upper QR code in the left-hand corner, you can click on that, the red and white one, and you can find out about all the AAPRP programs. This is only one of them, but you can find out about all of them. And you can find out about the Forward Ever shop that has political education clothing like what I have on here. Support independent revolutionary African organizations by ordering clothes from our Forward Ever shop. You can get the link there in that QR code. Go to Hood Communist, a revolutionary Pan-African blog. You can support that blog, as you should, through that QR code. At the bottom left, you can join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and you should do that. Go to AAPRP-intl.org. At the very least, even if you don't want to join, you should go there and watch the orientation video so you can at least be informed about who we are, because capitalism will tell you all kind of stuff about Pan-Africanism and socialism, and you'll think you know, and know you haven't spent 5 minutes studying it. So at least go to the party page so you can look at that and get a better understanding. And go to the QR code on the bottom right, the white and black one, and that supports our work on the ground. You can become a sponsor to Burkina Books, our work on the ground in Burkina Faso. The comrade was just here in the Bay Area a couple of weeks ago and talked about the work that we're doing not only in Burkina Faso, but in Niger and Mali, and the developments in the Sahel region there in Africa, and how that's really such a wonderful movement towards the Pan-Africanism that we are fighting for. So support those efforts, and you can go there and do that. And lastly, just want to encourage you to support and buy my book. It's only $8. Unfortunately, you can only order it through Amazon. If you don't like that and you have a better suggestion, I'd love to hear it. If you don't have a better suggestion, I'm not into intellectual masturbation. We're trying to get work done. So I don't want to hear your complaints when you just put gas in your car from Chevron and Shell and all those other capitalist corporations. But when it comes to supporting independent revolutionary work, now you got principles and you can't do any business with that. I mean, get out of my face with that nonsense. We're trying to get work done. So my book is a guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. And it's only $8. And we use 100% of the proceeds to finance the work. Like the events we're doing, like the one you see on the screen here, we feed people. That money doesn't just come out of the air. So buy my book so we can do that. We appreciate you joining. Come back next week. Tell people, forward ever, backwards never. Have a great rest of your day.